So in Acts chapter 2, it says that the early church devoted themselves to the teaching of the apostles. And I've got to say, that's something that's barreled down through all of the centuries, just like kept going as a constant theme, as something that's just generally good to do, right? But why is that a good thing to do? And some of you may have read parts of the Bible, but maybe not it in its entirety. And so it might seem daunting to pick up this book that's really an ancient collection. It's really more of a library of tons of different types of documents, all these different genres and poetries, histories and genealogies. There's stories and there's parables and there's letters and there's apocalypses. It's just, what do you do with this book that reads unlike any other book that you've ever experienced, right? Where do you even start? Well, you could start with the apostles' teaching. Now, fortunately, the early church had this sense of, we've got to figure out a way to narrow it down because it's really daunting to give somebody a big book like this, right? But around the year 190, it started becoming very, very popular to have this thing called the Apostles' Creed, which really outlines some of the most important tenets of the Christian faith. And if you've gone through confirmation class, if you've been through a new members course, you probably know of it. And if you've certainly been to church here in the past, we tend to say it on some of the big holidays of the year. The Apostles' Creed is 12 statements that tradition says each of the 12 apostles contributed a line to it. And then this right here became like one of the most important documents. Now, we can say that it is one of the best ways to start. But in this book, Acts chapter 2, in chapter 2 especially, when it says that the early church devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, well, there was no New Testament yet. That was the birthday of the church. So they actually didn't have as big of a Bible as we do now. Some of these letters actually weren't even written yet. So what they had to focus on was the literal teachings of the apostles as they would speak and preach and teach. All right. Now, I'm going to try to summarize up all of the apostles' teaching, summarize the entire New Testament right now in one sentence, with 4 small points. And hopefully this is something you can memorize, or even you could probably even fit on an index card and you put it in your mirror back at home. If I were to summarize the apostles' teaching in one sentence, it would be this: the reconciliation of all things in Christ and Christ crucified. Let me say it again. The reconciliation of all things in Christ and in, let's say, that Christ crucified for certain. Now, this is if you want to say anything, I would think that is one of the best sentences ever. It essentially says all animosity, all anger and frustration between God and man, and maybe even in other ways too, is completely gone. So many of us carry over this understanding that God is furious and angry, that God is completely wrathful and just holding back a hammer to smash down on us. Or we think of the wrath of God like it's the sword of Damocles, which is hanging by a thread ready to drop on us at any moment. Well, that's not what the apostles were teaching. The apostles were teaching the reconciliation of all things in Christ and Christ crucified. And that would just be, go ahead, look at Colossians 1 for that. But what else do we have to say? Because I said there were 4 points and then we'll be done. Well, in light of the fact that all things have already been reconciled back to God, including you and including the neighbor that you have that doesn't believe yet in Jesus, so you probably should go tell him about this. The fact that all things have been reconciled should cause us to want to do 4 things. You ready? Clean up. The fact that everything is good with God and God is actually freely chosen out of love to be for us, not against us, it kind of gives us a different reason for wanting to clean our lives up, right? Grow up. Growing up would mean now that all things have been reconciled back to God, I should really take up responsibility for some things and look around my world for places that are not yet reconciled and take that as my responsibility from God, and that's how I can help grow up. Third would be to wake up. Now that all things have been reconciled back to God in Christ and Christ crucified, I really should wake up to the fact that everything around me is spiritual. How I brush my teeth, that's a spiritual exercise. How you eat your pudding, spiritual exercise. Whether or not you know how to appreciate dandelions or animals at the zoo or sunsets or, I don't know, anything. Wake up. Most of us think that that Christian faith, that Christian religion really is only concerned with cleaning up, but not also growing up or waking up. And then here's the best one. Well, I'm not sure if it's the best, but it's just show up. So many of us go through our lives looking ahead at the future, right? With fear or excitement, or we go through life looking backwards at how back then were my best years. Back then was when I was traumatized by some really bad things, and we forget to live in the now. So I would like to present you an idea. What is the apostles' teaching that the early church focused on? I would say that it is the reconciliation of all things in Christ and Christ crucified, and that leads us to want to clean up, grow up, wake up, and show up. Now, you may not do those things in that specific order. Let's say you, in your lifetime, you might prefer, or maybe it just happens to you, you just start to wake up first. Well, that's fine. Or let's say you started to grow up for a while before you decided to start cleaning up. Let's say you started to show up to your life. You started being present to it in the moment right here, right now. And then, as a result of being present, you started to wake up and then clean up or to grow up. It doesn't matter which one of those ups you start with, just get started. Because, and this is my own personal definition, religion is designed to help us reconnect with the things around us. Now, all of us have a tendency to connect to things and to people around us in the wrong way. And so Christianity, and especially Jesus as he works on our hearts, helps us to let go of certain things so we can grab other things as we should, to be reconnected to ourselves, to other people, to the things that we own, to the families that we have, to the church that we're a part of. Jesus wants us to connect to all of these things in the right way. And guess what word that could be called? Reconciled to each of these things, to be reconnected to them in the way that we ought. So here's the last thing I would like to say. I just want to beg you, beseech you, plead with you. Get to know the apostles' teaching. It's very easy in today's world to pass off Christianity as just another collection of myths, right? As though it's just another collection of Aesop's fables or a whole bunch of fairy tales that maybe help us to go to sleep at night. I'm going to wager that this book is full of far more than just fairy tales Aesop's fables, I think this book actually does point us back to this ultimate reality that says in Christ and in Christ crucified, all things have been reconciled. And so as a result of that, I think I want to clean my life up, grow up a bit, show up to my own life, and wake up to the fact that everything around us is deeply embedded with the presence of God. So go ahead, do that. We'll see you later.